went into a tizzy as soon as the announcement was made, and Reliance Industries as a stock has fallen more than 8%. Oil refiners, particularly from the private sector, they've attracted huge gains from exporting fuel to markets in Europe, to markets in the US. And this amidst the surge in international oil prices. So windfall gains, what we're talking about, that needs to be put in context. For that, Soumit Sarkar is joining us to break down how going ahead with these policy shifts, how is that likely to impact Reliance, what brokerages are saying in terms of these particular stocks. Let's find out from Soumit.
Well, the Indian government has imposed special extra duty taxes on export of diesel, petrol and ATF. So let's see what's the impact on the Indian refiners of these duties. Firstly, on Reliance Industries, if you see, according to Jefferies, diesel, petrol and ATF contribute nearly 72% of Reliance's refining capacity, and the blended impact on their GRMs because of this could be around $7 per barrel. For Morgan Stanley, they're expecting the impact to be in the range of around $6 to $8 per barrel, while JP Morgan, on the other hand, is saying the impact could be as much as $13 per barrel on Reliance Industries' gross refining margin. And according to them, every $1 per barrel impact on the gross refining margin lowers RIL's EBITDA by close to $400 million US dollars. Now, if you see, the interesting part here is that analysts expect the refining business of Reliance Industries to contribute nearly 331 to 445 rupees per share on the SOTP valuation, but the fall in share price that we have seen today is close to 200 rupees. Now coming on to the other oil refiners. Now for oil marketing companies like Indian Oil Corporation, BPCL and HPCL, the impact is expected to be limited because most of their refined oil product productions goes towards domestic requirement, and very little of it is on the export side. For MRPL and Chennai Petro, if you see, close to 10% of their production is on the export side, and hence there could be some limited impact on their financials. There has also been a tax imposed by the government on oil producers like ONGC, Oil India and Vedanta, and what the government is saying that these oil producers will now have to pay an additional tax of close to $294 per ton on oil producing on the oil that they produce, which translates into the impact of close to $40 per barrel. Now this means that producers like ONGC, Oil India and Vedanta will have to give nearly $40 per barrel to government as additional tax going forward. And according to analysts, a $5 per barrel drop in the realizations for ONGC and Oil India could impact their EPS by close to 7 to 12%. And for Vedanta, the consolidated the impact on their consolidated EBITDA of this additional tax that they have to pay to the government now could be in the range of around 6 to 7% according to analysts.
All right, Soumit, they're breaking it down for us, what brokerages are making of these stocks and how they're likely to get impacted. Now, let's get the larger picture going. For that, we are being joined by DK Sarraf, the former Chairman and Managing Director of ONGC, and also joining us is ET Now's Consulting Editor, Mythili Bhusnurmath. Great to have you both with us. First, coming to you, Mr. Sarraf, this move by the government, do you believe this is a good, sustainable solution? And how do you think this kind of move is going to impact upstream oil companies?
I think two things have happened today. One is increase or levy of export duty on certain petroleum products, namely petrol, diesel and ATF, at the rate of 13 rupees for diesel and 6 rupees per litre on the other two. So what has happened, everybody knows that the crude prices have increased. The petroleum products prices globally have increased even more. Products are being exported to Europe, and with the result that the refining margins have increased very much, and the refiners have been making a supernormal profit. And when I say refiners, I think we would need to divide it into two parts. One is the pure refiners, companies like MRPL, Chennai Petro, Reliance, Niara, Numaligarh Refinery, who do not have exposure in marketing, because in marketing, companies are incurring losses or reduced profit, and in refining, they are making super profit. So the OMCs like IOC, BPC, SPC, they have both the portfolios, so they balance the two very much. But the pure refiners like Reliance, MRPL, Chennai Petro Chemical, they are only pure refiners, so their profits have increased. So the government has very correctly, very intelligently levied the export duty on these products. So
Mythili, do weigh in on this. Let me take it across to Mythili. You think this impact is going to be enough or perhaps enough to at least arrest the fall of the Indian currency? Because the mission seems to be that, isn't it?
Well, I don't think the mission is quite that. Of course, that would perhaps be one of the effects, and especially as far as the gold import duty is concerned. But as far as the oil export duty is concerned, I think it's to ensure that there is enough availability of oil domestically. There are some states where we had more presence of private marketing companies, and these retail outlets, their virtually supplies had dried up because they were having to sell at a loss. So I think this is more as far as the export tax on petroleum is concerned, diesel is concerned. It was more to ensure that there is enough supply domestically. That I think was the main consideration. And as far as the windfall, tax on windfall profits is concerned, that I think is really, as far as Mr. Sarraf has said, entirely correct, because these were companies, especially the poor refiners, were making huge profit. So naturally, the government does think in terms of taxing them, partly because it is a windfall profit and all governments like to tax windfall profits, and also because government's revenues are under extreme stress. So a combination of all these things makes the government think, well, why not kill two birds with one stone? So I think that really is a rationale as far as petrol is concerned. On the import of gold, certainly, it is partly, I think, to arrest the pressure on the rupee, but the main consideration really is on the current account deficit, particularly when you see in all countries, whenever inflation is high, and particularly in India, when inflation rises, people automatically turn to gold as a safe haven. And we've seen that in the past, and that's what's happening now also. As inflation is rising in the country, people are turning to gold, despite efforts to wean people away from physical gold through sovereign gold bonds. The measure has not succeeded entirely. Those sovereign gold bonds have been pretty successful. People still want to import gold, and hence the tax on import of gold. So it's a combination of reasons.
Mr. Sarraf, when we talk about the supply at pumps, do you think that this kind of policy move could ensure that? And will it also help in controlling prices at the retail level?
Absolutely. So far as the availability of petroleum products domestically is concerned, it would definitely help, because the export duty on products, refiners would have to pick up themselves. So there would be an incentive for them to supply the products in the domestic market. So this is a good move. So this is a good move.
Can you hear me, sir?
No, perhaps I should give you a minute, Mr. Sarraf, and take it across to Mythili while perhaps you attend to that phone call. Mythili, growth is one important factor right now where the government would be very concerned. RBI in a smaller measure, but they need to keep the inflation in check and yet keep the growth momentum going. With the kind of gains, the windfall gains that are going to be taxed, and the way the government is approaching it, how do you think the growth momentum is going to be maintained in times to come?
Well, that's going to be a very tall ask, because it is a fact that growth momentum all over the world will be impacted. And the easy money policy that central banks have followed in the past is now come back to haunt them, with the result that rising inflation has itself become an impediment to growth. So this is going to be a serious problem for the government, and not only for this, our government. In fact, India has done relatively better because our base is so low. We are a poor country, so a growth of say 6 to 7% is, what is perhaps to be expected, and in fact we should be doing much more. So frankly, I think it is going to be very difficult for government to maintain the growth momentum. There are pressures on government's revenue, and at the same time government is being forced to spend more. So as a result of all this, it is going to be tough for government to find the money to invest in infrastructure. And unless you have capital expenditure, unless you have investment taking place, you're not going to see growth really pick up. So it's going to be very tough for the government to actually balance both, do the necessary support as far as the bottom of the pyramid is concerned, people who are suffering on account of inflation, and at the same time ensure that there is enough money to invest in capital, assets, creation of capital assets. So it's going to be tough, and I don't think we'll really be able to see the kind of growth that we saw, even pre-pandemic, it had been slowing down. So this is going to make things additionally difficult. It's going to be tough for government, particularly when revenues are under pressure.
And Mr. Sarraf, talking about oil refiners, since this is I just want to understand from you whether you've seen this. Is there a precedent for this in terms of government measures in the kind of times that we live in for them to come in and make sure that the windfall gains and make sure that taxes are imposed on windfall gains, actually oil refiners pay up? Is that something that has happened in your career?
No, it has not happened, especially because the deregulation we have seen only last 20 years, 25 years, and such type of situation has not occurred in the last 20 years. So this is, we can say, unprecedented, but the history is of only last 25 years or so. But more importantly, the cess which has been levied on crude oil producers, namely ONGC, Oil India and Vedanta, that is concerned, there is a difference between the refineries and upstream companies. Because refinery is like a factory, you make a factory and then there is no capital expenditure year to year. But it is not so in an upstream company. You have to drill wells every year, you have to develop the new fields because old fields are getting depleted. So there is a capex every year and huge capex. Now, when the prices are low, when the prices are high, you build your cash so that when the prices would be low, you are able to help yourself and incur those capex. I would give you an example. In 2015-16, we have also seen, when I was CMD, we have seen a crude oil price of $25. And there was absolutely no cash with the company. And still we maintained the capex. We took loan, we spent whatever accumulated cash we had, but the cess and royalty was never reduced. Now, when the prices are increasing, the companies should be allowed to accumulate cash so that when the prices would again go down, then I mean this capex they are able to.
But now by doing this, Mr. Sarraf, by this move by the government, any kind of the good balance that many companies may have had might get eroded. Isn't that the fear?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And in any tax system, there needs to be two things. One is transparency, which is already there, and another is predictability. Now, so that the predictability is concerned, and the investors, they come if the tax regime is predictable. Now, we pay $40 on crude oil as additional cess. So ONGC may be comfortable, I do not know, but ONGC may be comfortable because prices are high.
Right.
But when the prices come down to 110, 100 and maybe 90, will this 40 would automatically come down? It may be reviewed as the Honorable FMS said, but there is no guarantee. Right. So, and if the formulation could have been, if the price is 115, you pay 40. If the price is 100, you pay 25. If the price is 80, you pay 5. And if the price is 75, you pay nothing. So, which means there is a predictability and investors would not have any concern. Right. So, investors is not...
This last, and Mythili, perhaps I should come to you for the last word on this in terms of whether these kind of moves are sustainable, or are these going to be, because sometimes you, when you're not that predictable, when you don't know exactly how policy is going to shift, because these are times when a lot is changing and the government has to be adept, and that's one part of the debate. But sometimes if predictability goes, like Mr. Sarraf is saying, then perhaps we land ourselves in a problem. Do you see that?
Well, yes, but the government also has a very tough job. It's basically tightrope walking because these are windfall profits precisely because oil price is so high and the rupee is depreciating. So a combination of both has meant that these oil refiners are able to import cheaper Russian oil thanks to the discounts and then refine them and export. So these are measures because depending on the situation that is, as it exists today. Tomorrow, if oil prices fall, you would not have these windfall profits and hence you would not perhaps feel the need to tax. So I think these are slightly in the nature of knee-jerk reaction, but I think it's a tough job to govern the country like ours, especially when you have so many uncertainties. So I think we'll have to give government a little bit of a rope or the long rope on that and say, well, perhaps this is the best they could do in this situation.
Well, uncertainty is the name of the game right now, and not just India, it's across the world, and we have to have that much more adeptness to tackle the situation as they arise. But thanks very much for your perspectives on this, Mr. Sarraf and Mythili. Let's also